I want to begin with a little story. Every morning, a woman leaves her house with the same umbrella. It's not raining. It's never raining in this story. She carries it anyway, past the same cafe, the same corner shop, and the same bus stop. But one morning, she didn't bring it with her. The sky is still clear, the street is still familiar, but halfway along her usual route, she pauses, looks up, and smiles. Because for the first time in months and months, her hands are free. And that's the whole story. A small beginning, a steady continuation, a turn, and a small conclusion. There is no great conquest or revelation. And if you're thinking, hang on, what was that? That's good. That umbrella isn't really about the weather. It's about what we carry just in case. The protective habits, the over-preparing, the small bracing, we normalise as being responsible and being professional, and most importantly, being good. The twist isn't that a storm appears and it starts raining. The twist is that one day she realises she's safe without the protection, and that single internal shift is exactly what this episode is all about. Stories that don't need a struggle to be meaningful. In the last episode, The Story We Inherited, we explored how one particular story shape has become the default setting for modern communication, the hero's journey. And we named the shadow of that inheritance, the way it can convince us that a story only counts if it contains a dramatic rupture, a catastrophic fail, a triumphant comeback, or a villain we can point at and defeat. And that's the problem, because it makes so many people believe they don't have a story. So I offered a different centre of gravity in that episode, a relational arc held by three forces. Number one, mirrors, the moment your listener recognises themselves in the story. Bridges, the moment you move from me to us. And containers, the values and boundaries and purpose that makes the story safe to hold. Because we now know that story isn't just about entertainment. It's how we make meaning together. It's how we build trust and belonging, and how we transfer wisdom without forcing people into a fight. So today, we're going to open the cupboard and look at other shapes we can use with respect, with accuracy, and with practical application. Quick note before we go further. I'm going to share a few story structures that come from different cultural and literary contexts. I'm sharing them with respect and with awareness that a structure is never the whole tradition. I'm not a cultural custodian of these traditions, so I won't claim ownership. I won't oversimplify living cultures into a template, and I'll point you to sources and further reading in the show notes if you are interested. So if you are ready, then let's begin. Structure 1. Kishōtenketsu. Let's begin with the shape of a story you heard in the opening. Kishōtenketsu is commonly described as a 4-part structure: introduction, development, turn, and conclusion. And it's often discussed across East Asian storytelling and rhetoric. It originated in Chinese poetry and is common in Japanese and Korean narratives, including anime, manga, and literature. My kids and I love anime and manga and are huge fans of the narratives in Studio Ghibli films. Kishōtenketsu is frequently contrasted with Western plot models because it's often taught as not being primarily conflict-centered, in the way problem, battle, victory narratives can be. And this doesn't mean conflict never appears, it definitely can, but the engine is often contrast and reframe. You see something ordinary, and then the story turns slightly, and what you thought you were looking at becomes something else. This is why it can feel so relieving for people who might be a bit tired of framing their whole life as a fight or a struggle. Because it's not only a story shape, it's also described as an organizing pattern for composition and argument, a way of structuring meaning so the listener stays oriented until the turn arrives. So you can think of it as a structure that teaches you maybe to hold back a little bit, to let the ordinary be ordinary, to let the meaning arrive through the turn and not the tussly bits. So here's the shape of it. Ki is the intro. It sets the scene, it introduces characters and establishes the world as it is, the ordinary. Shō is the development. It expands on the intro, the pattern continues, the story deepens, and it's about developing the story without major conflict. Ten is the turn. The contrast, twist, or recontextualization. The 10 act deliberately holds back a major element, making the story feel unpredictable and engaging. And Ketsu is the conclusion. It resolves the story by incorporating the twist, bringing harmony and reflection, integration, meaning, and consequence. This structure plugs into our relational arc from the previous episode beautifully. Mirrors represent Ki and Shō because they create the recognizable human pattern like, oh, I know this. Bridges, 10 shifts from my detail to our meaning. And containers, Ketsu lands the insight without forcing you to do a hero pose. And Kishōtenketsu is powerful today when you want to create insight but not win an argument, when you want to tell a story without manufacturing a villain or nemesis, real or imagined. It's really great when you're speaking to people who don't need the hustle, grind, battle narratives to be moved to action. So I'm going to give you an example. The Post-it note. Every Monday, Elise arrives early into the bustling office and puts a brightly coloured post-it on her laptop. It says, "Don't apologise." She's good at her job. She's razor smart, calm, measured and kind. And still, every meeting she holds or attends begins the same way. "Sorry, just quickly. Sorry, can I add? Sorry, I know you're busy, but..." Everything starts with a sorry, and for a long time she told herself it's politeness. British politeness and social lubricant. But then, more recently, she's noticed the rest of the pattern. Her notes are always immaculate. Her slides are pristine and marketing department perfect. Her ideas are always framed as suggestions, never statements or proposals. And when someone interrupts her mid-sentence, she just smiles and goes quiet because she learned somewhere along the way that the fastest way to stay safe is to make yourself small. One day, she presents to a senior group and she tries something different. There are no apologies. She doesn't soften and go quiet, and she doesn't seek permission. She's steady, clear, and calm, and she's proud of herself. After the meeting, a colleague pulls her aside to give her some feedback. They really noticed a difference, but there is a bigger picture. They kindly say, "People do think you're always asking for permission." And that's the moment Elise realizes the apologies are never just British politeness. They were a subtle strategy, a decades-old spell, something wired in from way back. So, the next Monday, she changes the post-it. Instead of "don't apologize," she writes, "Speak like you belong here." She's at the same desk with the same laptop in the same meetings, but now with a different center of gravity. So here's your first experiment. Take a story you tell often. It could be your origin story, it could be your why I do this, it could be your about me, or it could be a leadership lesson. Then look at it through the lens of Kishōtenketsu. Tell it in 4 parts. Ki, name the ordinary pattern. Shō, show it repeating or developing. 10, reveal the reframe or turn the moment you saw things differently. And Ketsu, land the meaning that shifted inside you. In this alternative version of the hero's journey, there is no villain required, no nemesis or dark night of the soul or lone journey back, no triumph through trauma, although all of those have their place. With this version of a story shape, it's just the truth and a turn. Structure 2, ring composition. Now for a structure that feels almost ritualistic. And before I give you the modern version of ring composition, I want to give you a little potted history because this structure has deep roots and it deserves context. Ring composition is a way of organizing a story so it moves outwards from an opening, travels through a sequence of matched steps, reaches a central pivot, and then returns, echoing the beginning at the end. The simplest way to picture it is like walking into a forest on a path, arriving at a clearing, and then walking back out on the same path, noticing different things on the way back. What's fascinating is that scholars have argued that this isn't just a stylistic flourish of storytelling, but it can actually be a memory technology. In Homeric epic, which is the epic poems of the ancient Greek poet Homer of the Iliad and the Odyssey, ring structures have been identified at multiple scales. Inside speeches, inside scenes, even across large sections of the poem. And one reason scholars care about this is because the Iliad and the Odyssey emerged or were shaped by a world of oral performance. So when you're holding a huge narrative in your head, a ring becomes a kind of guardrail. It helps a teller keep their place, and it helps a listener tracked when an episode begins and ends. And that brings us to the most important idea, the one that changes how you feel about the story. In ring composition, the meaning isn't necessarily at the end. Very often, the meaning is in the middle. Classicist Steve Reese describes ring structures as terraces that lead you into a central core, and that core is frequently the heart of the story. In other words, the story doesn't build to a big final punch, it builds to a central truth and then it returns changed. And this meaning in the middle idea is central to anthropologist Mary Douglas's work, Thinking in Circles. Douglas argues that modern readers sometimes misread ancient texts because we expect linear logic. We expect the point to arrive at the end, and when it doesn't, we assume the writing is messy or unstructured. Her claim is that the structure is there, it's just circular, not linear. And she also notes that ring composition appears across many places in texts, which suggests it isn't a single invention with a single origin, it may be a recurring human way of organizing meaning. You may also hear of ring composition referred to as chiastic structure. Chiasmus is a mirror pattern in a sentence. A, then B, and then B, and then A. Ring composition is that same mirror idea, but stretched out across scenes. You move in, you hit a central truth, you return outward in echoes. So here are some that you may recognize, and I'll map them so you can hear the mirror. So here's a simple one. Let thy food be thy medicine, and medicine be thy food. So A is food, B is medicine, and then B is medicine and A is food. So it literally flips the two ideas. So that's chiasmus, a mirror inside one sentence. And ring composition is what happens when you take that same mirror idea and stretch it out across scenes and chapters and stories. Now, in modern pop culture, you'll hear people argue that some big series are built with ring-like symmetry too, where later installments echo earlier ones. In the Star Wars fandom and commentary world, there's a popular ring theory that argues the prequel trilogy mirrors the original trilogy in paired ways, with Anakin's arc set up as an inversion or reflection of Luke's. It's widely discussed online whether you buy it fully or not. It's a great example of how people recognize ring-like symmetry and find meaning in it. So, what does it look like in practical terms? Well, the simplest ring looks like this. A, the opening. B, deepen. C, deepen. X is the center, the truth pivot. And then you return back outward, changed. C, B, A. So the ending isn't the ending. It's an echo back to the beginning, but with a new meaning. And it's a structure that says, let me bring you back to where we started, but with different eyes. And once you understand that, you can use it today with so much integrity, especially for stories of maturity and healing and leadership and personal growth and business and identity. Because the point isn't the conquest and the triumph at endpoint, it's integration. Okay. I'm going to now show you what it looks like in a modern everyday story. And as you listen, notice how we start with an image, we travel inward to the real meaning, and then we return back out in echoes, like leaving and re-entering the same doorway, but as a different person. The do not disturb switch. Neve has a nighttime ritual that is so small it almost doesn't count as a ritual. No, it's not candles or journaling in her diary. She doesn't do a skincare 10-step, just one movement that happens without thought. The house settles, the lights dim, the doors close off, and Neve reaches for her phone. She doesn't doom scroll through social media, she doesn't even open an app. She simply flicks Do Not Disturb on. A small moon icon appears at the top of the screen and her shoulders drop, like something inside her relaxes. That tiny symbol says, "You're off duty now. You have permission to relax." That was A, the opening image and ritual. Now we move to B, the surface story. If you asked her, she'd say it's a really healthy thing to do. It means she has boundaries, she's taking care of her digital well-being, she's adhering to sleep hygiene. She's just someone who doesn't want her evenings hijacked by notifications and other people's urgency or needs. And that explanation is true on paper. And now we move to C, the deeper truth. The real reason sits deeper than well-being. When Neve is reachable, she feels porous. Just like her attention can be taken too easily, like she's open to others' moods and thoughts and energy, a bit like a sponge. A message arrives and she's suddenly standing in someone else's emotional weather, being thrown around by their winds and tides. A message arrives and she's suddenly standing in someone else's storm and sea. A missed call and her mind starts writing stories about the threat that might await. A group chat pings and she's back in that familiar place. Should I reply? What will they think if I don't? So, Do Not Disturb isn't just about silence, it's about control. It's a barrier between her inner world and everyone else's expectations. Then we move to D, the trigger moment, the pattern that reveals itself. One Friday night, she's staying with friends. It's a good night. They're sat round a kitchen table, a half-empty bottle of something fizzy, a warm, messy laughter that makes the time blur. Someone is telling a story, and Neve is actually in it, properly present, and then she feels it. Her hand starts drifting. She doesn't need to check anything. There's no emergency, her phone is face down beside her plate, but her thumb slides along the edge looking for that familiar latch. And suddenly, she realizes she's doing it without thinking, hovering over the Do Not Disturb switch, like she's about to lock the world out, in the middle of laughter and in the middle of being fine, when there was no need to. And now we move to X, the central pivot, and what it really means. And that's when it lands, the recognition. Do Not Disturb is acting like a shield from the feeling that she might miss something, disappoint someone, be needed, be judged, or be found lacking. From the constant low-level pressure of being available, which for Neve has never meant reachable, it's always meant responsible. It's like she can hear the old rule humming underneath everything. If I'm available, I risk being not enough or disappointing or over-promising and under-delivering. And right there, at the kitchen table with her friends, she feels the real cost of the habit. She keeps leaving her own life by half an inch before anything has even happened. And now we move back out. D, the response. Her thumb still hovers. The habit is right there, ready to complete itself, and then she stops. She turns the phone over, slides it to the far end of the table, Close enough it's still there, but far enough that it isn't running the room. When she returns to her story, her friend is telling, as if choosing presence is a physical act. Moving to C, the integration. Later, when she's in the spare room getting ready for bed, she feels the itch again, that small internal urgency to tidy the world, to close the loops, and to make sure nothing is waiting. And she notices that silence isn't automatically peace. Sometimes it's space, and space can feel exposed when you're used to filling it with readiness. So she sits on the edge of the bed for a moment and lets that discomfort be there without fixing it. Moving to B, the new surface story. The next morning, she sends a message to a good friend. I realise I use silence to control more than to rest, so I'm going to start practicing being more present in the moment, and it feels good to send that message, like telling the truth without turning it into a performance. And then moving back to A, the closing image. That night back at home, the same sequence returns. She's got the kettle on, the lights are on, and it's nice and quiet. And then Nina reaches for her phone. And yes, she still turns Do Not Disturb on, but this time she doesn't do it to act like a shield, but to do it like a choice. Not shutting the world out, but now she's choosing. She lets what in. Same phone, same moon icon, and now a different relationship with openness. That is ring composition. So your second experiment in this episode is to pick one image that represents the style of your story. It could be something concrete like a phone, a desk, a train, a pair of running shoes, a plant pot, a bath, whatever it might be for you. And then you open with it and you close with it. And you put the truth in the middle using this sentence. I thought it was about this, but it was actually about this. And that's the center of your story. Give ring composition a go and let me know what you find. Structure 3, braided narrative. So, if the hero's journey is a single track, a braided narrative is a plait. And I'd love to invite you to literally picture that for a second. So, a single track says, start here, go there, overcome this, arrive transformed. It's clean and it's satisfying. And it's also not how most of us actually live. Because real life isn't just about one storyline, is it? But multiple storylines running at the same time. You're trying to be a leader or a business owner and a parent at the same time. You're building a business while your nervous system is processing old patterns that might be holding you back. You're showing up online while part of you is still negotiating belonging to a space, community or group, or just with yourself. You're making decisions at your pace inside a culture that rewards certainty and speed. So braiding gives you permission to tell the truth with multiple truths coexisting at the same time. And before we use braiding as a tool, I want to give it some context because braided narrative didn't appear out of nowhere. The technique itself is ancient and has existed since classical antiquity in mythologies and epics. Humans have always placed stories side by side to create meaning through contrast, but the name braided essay became especially visible in creative nonfiction and lyric essay circles. Hybrid essays that gained prominence in the late 1990s through editors and writers like Deborah Tall and John DeGatta at Seneca Review. The term braided essay is commonly linked in writing craft culture to Brenda Miller and Susan Paula's Tell It Slant, where the braid is taught as a way of weaving strands that repeat and intersect to create meaning through juxtaposition. And academic work notes how braiding generates new meaning as strands reoccur and converge. So here's the key point. Braiding is a deliberate way of saying some truths can't be told in a single straight line. Because the meaning doesn't live only in one storyline, it lives in the space between those storylines. That's why braiding feels so true to modern life. We don't live one narrative at a time. We live personal experiences inside relationships, inside culture, and inside history. And the braid lets you tell the truth in stereo sound. You alternate your stories in short passes, like weaving, until your listener starts to feel the connection forming. And that matters because the brain loves patterns. When you hold two things side by side, a personal scene and a wider truth, the listener's mind starts doing what minds do best. It searches for meaning. It goes, oh, I see what this is really about. It's actually a very elegant way of holding complexity without forcing your life into a single heroic line. Here's a version you can use in a keynote, a podcast, a post, a workshop, anywhere. You choose 2 or 3 threads. 3 I recommend. Thread 1 is me, one specific moment I lived through my eyes. And that could be sensory, it could be concrete, it could be human. Thread 2 is you, a moment my audience, the client, the team lives, which is relatable and familiar. Thread 3 is the world, the wider pattern we're inside, the culture, the workplace norms, the era we're living in. And then you rotate them. And a good braid doesn't jump randomly, it moves with rhythm. So it's me, you, world, me, you, world, me, you, world, and then it clicks. If you're doing this yourself, keep each thread short, almost like beads on a string, and let the connection build over repetition. The meaning arrives through the weave. And braiding really does map to the relational arc we spoke about in the previous episode, because the mirror is the me thread that creates recognition. It says, here's a real human moment. The bridge is you and the world threads widening that meaning. So this isn't just me, this is us. And the container comes from the braid becoming the container. It holds the complexity safely. It lets you be nuanced without needing a neat hero ending. So it's more like, and then I understood, and then I chose differently, and then I stopped abandoning myself, and then I stayed. And this is powerful for thought leadership today because it lets you hold authority and humanity, personal and universal, and story and insight together without turning your life into a performance. And it's especially powerful if you want to speak about something real, like people-pleasing, leadership pressure, visibility, burnout, belonging, without making yourself the headline or turning your story into a dramatic arc you have to keep living up to. Braiding lets you be both. A person with a lived experience and a guide who can name the wider pattern. And that is the kind of storytelling that builds trust. So I've got an example for you, and I'm going to label each braid as a thread as I go through. 3 voices in the same room. Thread 1, me. I'm in a meeting. I should feel confident in this meeting. It's not a stretch and it's not a hostile room. These are my people. And I'm prepared. I know the material. I've even rehearsed the opening line in my head on the walk from the coffee machine to my desk. And still, as I start speaking, my throat tightens and my breathing shortens, like my body is trying to keep a secret. It's ever so subtle. It's not a huge big panic, but it's that familiar internal ancient feeling that says, be careful. Thread 2, you. A client tells me she keeps a backup paragraph in her notes just in case. It's a really detailed paragraph, and it's one where she over-explains and overshares the details just in case someone challenges her and tries to catch her out. And she calls it her insurance policy. And when she reads it out loud to me, she laughs, but the laugh is a little bit sarcastic and jaded because it doesn't sound like an insurance policy. What it sounds like is a detailed apology dressed up as evidence that she needs to prove. It sounds like, please don't misunderstand me, please don't think I'm stupid, and please don't be cross. Thread 3, the world. We live in a culture that rewards certainty. We are all searching for certainty as part of our human condition. And the nervous system hears that as perform like you are competent or lose belonging and get chucked out the tribe. So we start speaking like we're on trial, like we're in a dock giving evidence for our own legitimacy. We have to use all the words and then some more to prove ourselves. And you can see it everywhere. The overqualifying, the constant just, the preemptive disclaimers, the frantic detail. Because somewhere along the way, they learn your voice is safer if it's defensible. Back to thread 1, me. Back in my meeting, someone interrupts me mid-sentence. And it's perfectly okay for them to do that. They're not being rude, they're just eager and passionate, and they think they're building on what I'm saying. But my body doesn't read it as enthusiasm or passion. My body reads it as, you've lost the floor. Your voice doesn't matter. And my mouth does it what it learned to years ago. It goes dry and it closes. Just long enough to change my whole presence in the room. And I can feel myself shrinking into listening mode, nodding, tracking, making space, like that's the safest job. Thread 2, you. My client says to me, it's like there are 3 voices in the room. There's the voice I want to use, there's the voice that sounds professional, and then there's the voice that's trying not to get into trouble. And when she says it, I feel this big old wave of recognition. Not just as her coach, but as a human being with similar wiring. Because I know that third voice. It's the one that writes the detailed backup paragraph. It's the one that says sorry before you've even spoken. And it's the one that would rather over-explain than risk being understood. Thread 3, the world. That third voice is ancient. It's social survival. It goes back thousands of years to a time when belonging wasn't a nice to have. It meant safety in the group. It was food and survival. It was a shelter from predators and storms. It was being protected by the numbers of the group, so the body learned a rule. If you're at risk of rejection, reduce the risk. And one of the easiest ways to reduce the risk is to reduce your volume, to stay agreeable, to stay uncontroversial, to stay explainable. So yes, it is just a meeting. But the nervous system doesn't live in modern calendars. It lives in old landscapes. Convergence, where the braid clicks. And this is where the shift happens. As a practical act of leadership with yourself, we stop trying to delete that third voice because you can't shame your nervous system into confidence. Instead, we build a container for it. We say, thank you for trying to protect me, but I've got this now. And then we give ourselves a new micro move. We breathe, we make it slow, and we speak our sentences cleanly without the backup paragraph. We're just human. We hold ourselves and we are powerful, and that's where the calm confidence lies. So if you've ever over-explained to stay safe, you're just wired that way. And wiring can be honoured and rewired. Your third experiment today. Tell one story this week as a braid. Write 3 short threads. Me, one specific moment I lived. You, a moment my audience lives. And the world, the bigger pattern we're all inside. And then alternate them 3 times. Quick passes like weaving. Imagine them like 3 plaits in your hair. Then finish with 1 line. This is what I've learned about being human here, and explain that. And here's what I hope you take from this episode. The hero's journey isn't wrong, but it's not the only shape that can move people. And if you've ever felt like your story isn't big enough, dramatic enough, or worthy enough, it might not be your life that needs upgrading, just the structure you use to tell your story. So this week, just choose one. Kishōtenketsu, ring composition, or the braided narrative. And if you want a quick recap, here you go. Kishōtenketsu is what pattern did I live and what did I suddenly see? Ring composition is what image did I return to and what truth did I find in the middle? And the braid is what's my moment, your moment, and the world's moment, and what do they reveal together? And you can tell the same story you always tell, but in a new shape, because the stories we can tell instead are often the one that finally lets us be human. In the next episode of Stories in Our DNA, I'm looking at now and the future, and how we coexist and co-create story in the age we find ourselves in, with the rapid emergence of AI and the age of intelligence. I'll be speaking to David Lindberg, creator of an AI parallel universe, Nikaya, on what he believes we need to know and hold about story as we move forward and into the future.